Welcome back to Offsides, BUTV10's only professional sports talk show. I'm Daniel Maltz.
And I'm Monet Oda. Today our host Haley Alvarez-Lauto will be joined by analyst Seth Helman and Alexa Podalsky for a March Madness preview shot clock.
Then Carroll and Jared Caflun will join us via Zoom to discuss the NHL's salary cap controversies.
And finally, Alexa Gargiulo will take us through the rest of the Winter Olympics and break down the medal counts and on-ice controversies.
All this and more, Offside starts right now.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Shot Clock on Offsides. I'm Haley Alvarez-Lauto, and I'm joined by analyst Seth Helman and Alexa Podalsky, who are facing off to discuss all things March Madness. Here's how it works. There are 5 rounds, and each analyst will get 25 seconds per round to argue their case. Whoever has the most points at the end of the 5 rounds will be the champion. Seth, you're up first. Who do you have as the champion of this year's tournament?
Well, Haley, I've got to pick Arizona. They're a great team from top to bottom, and they're excellent at rebounding. That's one thing that you don't see all the time from one of those top teams. They're second in the entire NCAA Division I rebounding, and part of that is their strength on the offensive boards. Nothing to me is more important come crunch time than your ability to get a rebound off of a miss and take that and turn it into points and give you a win.
Well, the big team that I have ready to win it all is the Auburn Tigers. Their losses have been within 5 points, and one of them have been decided in overtime, while the other one earlier on in the season was decided in double overtime. They've dropped 100 points in Alabama, which is a huge feat, and have some good momentum going into March Madness. With players like Jabari Smith, who, might I add, is looking promising for the #1 draft pick this year, in my opinion, they have a guaranteed spot in the Final Four to win the championship.
Well, both teams certainly have what it takes to take home the title. I'm going to have to give this one to Seth. 1 point for Helman. So Alexa, who's your dark horse team entering the tournament?
Well, I'm going to have to go with Wake Forest. They're currently 5th in the Atlantic Coast, yet have played some tough games with some tough opponents. They've recently played #4 Duke, who have lost by a small amount, and beat Notre Dame, who's ranked 2nd in their division. They've also had a few blowout games with Pittsburgh and Boston College. I think with the way they're headed, they have a good chance to fix the slow start they had at the beginning of the season and boost their way far into the bracket.
Well, I'm going to have to pick Providence. They've been hot all year long, and while they're going to end up being around a 3 or a 4 seed, and that doesn't exactly make them an underdog, they're certainly not favorites either. They have a great starting 5 with not a single guy averaging less than 9.7 points, which is hugely important to be able to go out there and say, hey, we've got 5 guys, and you're not going to be able to stop any single one of them. And their top scorer hasn't attempted a 3 all year long. How's that for analytics?
We all love a good underdog story. Wake Forest has really shown us a lot of tenacity in their last few games. So point for you, Alexa. Seth, who do you think is going to underperform this year?
Well, it's got to be Duke. This is the exact same Duke team that we've been seeing for the past 10 to 15 years from Coach K. An unbelievable amount of young talent that loses at some point in March. Now, they've got Paolo Banchero, who I think is the best prospect in the upcoming draft class, and he looks like the real deal, but I don't think it's going to be enough for them. Unfortunately for Coach K, in his last ride, he's going to end up losing before the big game.
It's obvious Houston's going to be the team most likely to underperform. Yes, they're at the top of their division, but with teams like SMU, Tulane, and Cincinnati to beat, they've had a relatively easy schedule so far. Not only have they lost to the 20-7 SMU Mustangs in early February, but the 17-9 Memphis Tigers beat them by 10 not too long ago. This was followed by a close game against the 13-12 Wichita State Shockers. Houston's already pretty low in the top 25 rankings, so in this case, Houston has definitely got some competition once they enter the tournament and play teams out of their division.
Well, we've got 2 great points here. But the numbers don't lie, so for that reason, Podalsky gets the point. Alexa, who do you have as the MVP of the tournament?
Most valuable player is obviously going to be Oscar Tshiebwe from Kentucky. The man has been on fire this whole season. With his field goal percentage at 59.7% and the fact that he leads the NCAA in rebounds is a huge help for his team. He also leads his team for points, steals, and blocks per game. While I don't see Kentucky winning the tournament, they're definitely Final Four worthy. Throughout all of February, Oscar just seems to be getting better and better, so it makes sense that he be the best player in the tournament.
Well, I picked Arizona, so I'm going to have to take Arizona's best player in Benedict Mathurin as the MVP. And look, Benedict Mathurin is an unbelievable athlete. He's going to dominate you up close, and he can also shoot the three-point ball pretty well. He's their best consistent three-point shooter by volume compared to anybody else on that roster. He leads the team in points. He's an unbelievable rebounder for his size. I don't think that anyone should be surprised if he drops 30 at any point.
Well, we certainly have two great athletes out there, but I'm going to have to agree with Alexa on this one. I think Oscar's got the potential to be the MVP. So Seth, which top team is most likely to make a first-round exit?
Well, I've got to take Gonzaga. Out of all of the teams that are up there for the consideration of a 1 seed, Gonzaga to me is the one that has the most to lose. I think that they're going to come out, they're going to be a little bit nervous, and while I don't really think that they're going to lose in the first round, I think they're the most likely. They finally made it to the championship game last year, and then all of a sudden they lose it to Baylor. So their ghosts are definitely haunting them right now, and that definitely gives them the potential to lose to a 16 seed.
Now, these top teams are all great, but if I had to choose, I'd pick Baylor for the first round exit. They just recently lost to Texas Tech twice, Oklahoma State and Alabama, which sets them behind powerhouses like Gonzaga and Duke. Baylor seems to lose against teams they should have the upper hand with, so 2 losses to Texas Tech when they're ranked lower than them in the division is just something I can't seem to overlook. Since the other top teams consist of teams like Gonzaga, Duke, and Arizona, Baylor just seems like the obvious choice who will be getting the boot first.
Well, guys, that was a battle well fought, but I'm going to have to give Alexa the point and the win. That's it for the shot clock. Congrats, Alexa, on the win. I'm Haley Alvarez-Lauto. Now, Ty and Jared, over to you.
Thank you guys so much. Today, I'm joined by Jared Caflun, who is our Offsides correspondent in Los Angeles. Jared, I think the question on everyone's mind, how is LA reacting to the Rams Super Bowl win?
They're reacting great. I think the Rams have been really trying to make a fan base here, make a home after moving from St. Louis. And while the Dodgers and the Lakers definitely are the LA teams, I think they're starting to really win the city over. And
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to be talking about salary cap circumvention in the NHL, specifically teams and general managers that use long-term injured reserve to circumvent the cap. Long-term injured reserve is a relatively simple rule in the NHL that just allows for teams to mitigate the salary implications of players they have that are currently injured and not playing, so they can call up other players in their stead. However, teams and general managers have been working around the long-term injured reserve rules to preserve their salary cap and have way more higher paid players on their team during the playoffs when the salary cap doesn't count.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the repeating champions, the Tampa Bay Lightning. They only were really able to repeat the way they did because of Nikita Kucherov's situation, a player that was probably ready in early April at the end of the season, but they held him out to circumvent the rule because there is no salary cap in the playoffs. And that way, his $9.5 million cap, which is pretty low for a superstar like him, is still a very large number that they were able to avoid and keep depth pieces like Tyler Johnson on their team for that cup run. And I really think that's why they won it all.
Yeah, and Kucherov returned for game 1 of the playoffs. He was ready and he was flying. After the Lightning eliminated the Carolina Hurricanes in the second round, Hurricanes star defender Dougie Hamilton said, quote, "We had a great season. We lost to a team that's 18 million over the cap or whatever they are," end quote. Doug, I think a lot of hockey fans feel the same way. I mean, when you look at the roster of these teams that are in the playoffs and the salary cap hit of those players, it can really seem unfair for teams that follow the rules and still stay under that 85 million or so in the playoffs.
It is unfair. It's unfair for the players. It's unfair for the teams. It's unfair for the GMs. But the thing is, the GMs that aren't doing it aren't the smart ones. The smart ones, it's a rule that's being encouraged, I think, in the NHL. I think a smart GM should do this rule. As much as it's a bad move, it's also the way to win. I mean, the Lightning have just repeated by holding out a star player. If you had a player like Kucherov and he was able to come back, but you knew that you could have $9.5 million worth of cap flexibility if you just waited a few weeks, why wouldn't you do that?
It's a big strategic advantage. It's funny you mentioned that actually because there's another instance of that happening in the NHL this very season. The Vegas Golden Knights, I mean, they traded for an injured Jack Eichel, who is a superstar when he's healthy. And as soon as he started making the steps to get back on the ice, they put their other superstar forward, Mark Stone, on long-term injured reserve. Who knows how long he's going to be out? They haven't put a timetable on it. I think it's relatively suspicious given what happened to the Lightning last year. Vegas is in a very good position in the Pacific. They're probably going to make the playoffs. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Mark Stone return for game 1 just like Kucherov did.
Yeah, I don't think that Mark Stone is a player that we might see until the playoffs. Now, we can't know that. You know, we could have this discussion in May and really know when he actually returned. But I think it's pretty easy to predict we will not see him until game 1 of the playoffs. Now, that could be completely wrong, but it wouldn't be surprising. It just worked for Kucherov, and the Knights are as desperate to win as a cup as the Lightning were a few years ago. So it's a golden ticket right now to be a cup contender.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. The reason that I think a lot of fans are upset about this specifically is because, let's be honest, you don't buy a ticket to go see your favorite player sit in the press box, especially not when they're healthy. And so while you mentioned it may provide a strategic advantage to these GMs, I think the league would be sorry not to act on the circumvention of the salary cap that we're seeing right now at this level. I mean, Tampa Bay, like Dougie Hamilton said, was $18 million over the cap in the playoffs. Vegas, if they continue this path and take Stone all the way to the playoffs on injured reserve, they'll be almost $20 million over the salary cap this year. I think the solution is a forfeiture of draft picks to teams that blatantly abuse this rule. The forfeiture of draft picks would be scaled to how much over the salary cap they are. I think you take away a 7th or a 6th or a 5th round pick for teams that are a couple million over. But if you're more than 25% of the salary cap over during the playoffs, you should be penalized for that. That's not a fair playing field for teams that follow the rules.
Yeah, and I think that would work maybe in the long term and start to discourage teams. But also, if you have a chance to win the cup, I think the Lightning would have been able to forfeit some picks last year in return to repeat as champions. I think most teams would give up
Banners
3%
are forever.
to win the cup.
Banners are forever.
They are. And because of that, I think the only way to really remove this would be to have the salary cap extend to the playoffs. There's really no reason why it shouldn't be. Teams have to make sacrifices to win the cup, and that would be including teams having star players coming back. Because at the end of the day, we want the star players to play the whole season. And to bounce off your point earlier, the fans not only want to see the players, they want to see the players in the regular season. And right now we're delegitimizing a third of the season. February through April, a lot of these star players might be sitting out, just like the NBA has load management. We don't want that to be a norm for our sport leagues. So I think the best way would be to add the salary cap, have these players play in the regular season, and actually see some competition again, not just in the postseason, but in the regular season.
Absolutely. Very well said, Doug. As always, thank you so much for joining us today. Enjoy the sun in Los Angeles. Everyone at Offsides can't wait for you to be back, and we'll see you in the studio.
Thank you, Tyler.
All right, now we're going over to Lex for our Offsides Olympic recap.
Thanks, Ty. Let's kick things off by talking about Canadian flag bearer from the opening ceremony, Marie-Philippe Poulin, who returned home from Beijing to Canada with a +1, another Olympic gold medal. She's no newbie, having won her first gold in 2010 at age 18 in her Olympic debut. The now captain of Team Canada has an Olympic career total of 3 gold and 1 silver. After taking that silver 4 years ago in Pyeongchang, South Korea, Canada was hungry. Their hunger, in combination with their confidence after coming off an International Ice Hockey Federation World Championship win, one in which Poulin had scored the game winner in overtime, was a driving force in getting gold in Beijing. Of the 6-point leaders, 8 of the top 10 of them are Canadian. This raises a big question. Was this the best Team Canada the Olympics have seen yet? With Sarah Nurse on the team, it certainly seems like it might be. Nurse is the first Black Canadian woman to play in the Olympics. With this accomplishment came many others, like leading the team in both points and assists. Nurse and Poulin have both been added to the EA NHL 2022 game. Now, let's do a brief overview of the gold medal winners from the Beijing Games. Norway led the pack with 16 and finished with 37 total to lead all countries. They were followed by Germany at 12, China at 9, and the US and Sweden at 8. Lastly, let's talk about American snowboarder Julia Marino. Marino won silver in women's snowboarding slopestyle event. 8 days later, it was announced she would not be competing in the debut of the Big Air event due to her Prada snowboard no longer being eligible for use in the time between the events. To participate in the Olympic Games, a competitor must respect and comply with the conditions of participation established by the IOC. However, Marino could have been protected by the 3rd bylaw of the Olympic rules, which states, competitors who participate in the Olympic Games may allow their person, name, picture, or sports performances to be used for advertising purposes during the Olympic Games, in accordance with the principles determined by the IOC Executive Board. Clearly, the Executive Board felt this was a violation of principles, but I do not believe that should be the case. This decision was unfair, and Marino should have been able to use her board. Daniel and Monet, back to you.
Thanks, Alexa. That's all we have for this episode of Offsides. If you're interested in joining our team, please email us at offsides@butv10.com.
Also, be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Offsides10.
On behalf of our entire cast and crew, thanks for watching and have a great night.